Hi, welcome back. Hamish Taylor here again with an important video about sleep. I am passionate about helping people get their sleep right, exploring all the different nuances around sleep. And this is one of my introductory takes on sleep. Now, you can disagree and take your own opinions on it, and that's great. And obviously the lived experience is incredibly important. But first of all, here's a disclaimer. As usual, read that when you wish, and we'll dive straight in. Sleep. Sleep is obviously incredibly important, and I put it up there in equal terms with hydration. Obviously, breathing's at the top of the list. That's a 2 or 3 minute experiment for most people. In fact, for most people, it's about a 1 minute experiment. But obviously, your breathing, the access to air, pretty important stuff. Hydration and sleep. After 2 or 3 days of no hydration or no sleep, you're going to be spilling the beans to whoever's asking you any questions. My point is your whole powers of reasoning, your whole powers of resilience and resistance drop off a cliff if you don't have sleep. Nutrition, sure, that's further down the list, but we're here to talk about sleep today. And one of the key things that I see in clinics so often about sleep is that people have got themselves in a right old muddle and mess about it, and that is not their fault. It is often as a result of the product of being involved in a modern, post-industrial, materialistically driven, boss breathing down your neck environment. And we have been taught quite a lot, in my opinion, the wrong things about sleep, and we forget how close we are or how not very far removed we are from some ancient patterns. And sleep has a huge role to play in clearly resetting vast amounts of our biochemistry, and it might be worth just checking back in on the melatonin and serotonin video, which was how to get your light right. And I'll put a link in the description below about that. But just bear with me for a moment. I want to take you through a short journey with sleep. You can see this video is a little bit longer than some of the others, but I just want you to have a think about this. Take this information as you wish. Try and incorporate it when you can. But what I can tell you, for those that have got themselves stressed about not sleeping, waking up now worried that they're not sleeping, which of course stops them from sleeping, this may be of some benefit. I appreciate fully that lots of people won't be able to instigate a lot of what I'm about to talk about in their daily lives, but if you can, don't underestimate what you probably can achieve in your sleep improvement. So I'm going to, for simple terms, just divide the 24-hour period into 2 sections, just to help us understand this. And we're going to make this the nighttime and this the daytime. It is not unusual for people to report that they have a bit of a slump somewhere towards the middle of the afternoon in the daytime. And it is also not unusual for people to report that they have a wakefulness time sometime after midnight and before 6 o'clock. And you can start to see where we're going with this probably already. That we've got some wakefulness in the nighttime and we've got some sleepiness in the daytime. Now, we'll start with the daytime sleep. And obviously, most people know and have heard of this because it's called the siesta. Now, here in the UK, we don't go into our siestas very much. In fact, we're quite derogatory about them. They're often called a granny nap or a grandpa nap. And we'll often feel that we're not performing well at work if we're feeling sluggish or tired at this time. And nothing could be further from your biological truth in this. But we've got some pretty cool stuff in the forms of sugar and caffeine to get us through this time. And then clearly that doesn't sort us out very well, because usually when we come to get home from work, we need some alcohol to try and calm the brain down again. Now, clearly this is very generalized, but you get the idea. So we've got this thing called the siesta. And what's important to remember is that this is an important time for vast amounts of the world's population. And that's not to say that it's a bad thing, it's just that here in the UK, we don't have to stop because it doesn't get so hot. But that's not a reason to ignore our biochemistry on the subject. So let's talk about the siesta for a moment. The siesta is a time where you're not trying to make your daytime a nighttime sleep. Your siesta is not a nighttime sleep. It should be a daytime sleep. So the most key thing, and I'm going to write a number of different things here, is that you should sleep in the light. You don't need a face mask, you don't want an eye mask, you want to be able to sleep in the light. And it is important that you do so that your brain is not thinking that this is a nighttime sleep. You are not sleeping in your bed. You could sleep on your bed, but I would recommend that you sleep the other way round, so that you're not actually have your head on your pillow in your normal sleeping environment. And you're certainly not under the covers. And I'd also recommend that you wear your clothes if you are to have a siesta sleep. There are a few other things that we're going to carry on here, but we're not trying to make this a nighttime event. The next thing to do is to listen to some voices. Now, if you can listen to a podcast, that can be really helpful. And this comes back to a very simple and ancient part of our body's biochemistry. We were sleeping here essentially because it was too hot. And we want to be careful that we don't oversleep, and making sure that we have a situation where we are feeling secure. Because when you go to sleep, you change your position on the survival curve. Now that's fine when you're in your house and the door's shut, and I understand all of that. But that's really quite a modern construct for human beings. Usually we'd be sleeping in a lot more exposed environment if we were in our natural environment. So making sure that you're safe is important. One of the ways you can do that is listen to a voice, or you can trick your brain into listening to a voice, because most people will remember a time when they were very small that they didn't want to be left alone, and they would fall asleep much better on the sofa if their parents were having some people around. And also children, any parents out there will know that their children will sleep much better if they're actually involved in the environment of the party or the gathering than if they are stuck in their room somewhere in a quieter part of the house. Actually, we'll sleep much better with the hearing of familiar voices. And there's a reason for this that we might go into in a little bit later. So, on your bed, not in your bed, and the other way round, in light and listening to some voice. Now, this could be, as I say, a familiar podcast, something you're not needing to be examined in or anything like that, and that can be very useful. The other thing that can be useful here is to make sure that you restrict the time. The time is important. There is some evidence that 40 minutes is ideal, but don't ignore your own chemistry. It is important that if you do find that you're relaxed and you're sleeping, but then you suddenly wake up after 15 minutes, then you need to get up. And it's very important to get up. It's not very easy, though, to write walking away from me, and you can tell my writing isn't terribly good anyway. But the point is, you need to get up. If you feel awake, get up. This is not a time for hitting the snooze button or anything like that. It's about getting up and getting on with your day. And yes, it will feel odd for a couple of moments. Stamp your feet, take some deep breaths, have a glass of water, and you'll probably be right on track, having really benefited from switching your brain off for even 10 minutes. But 40 minutes maximum. We are not wanting to go more than that unless there are other things going on and you are particularly elderly, or you've got some injury or some other elements of health to overcome. But what we want to do is make sure it's a fixed time. So let's say that you have to be back at work or back on the case, and you have to be there at, say, 2:30, then try and get into a siesta situation at 10 to 2. But if you only get there at 20 past 2, don't go past 2:30, or whatever time you've set. Because setting that rigid time, or at least being pretty focused on that, can really help your body's circadian and diurnal rhythms. Now, this is a little bit odd to explain without getting a bit euphemistic, but sometimes actually holding something physically hard can be useful, and for a lot of people that can be their phones. And that is a deep ancient reflex for obviously falling asleep with a weapon or a tool or some way that you can protect yourself, or of course if you're a small person, holding on to your parents' bony fingers, or of course if you're up a tree, holding on to the branch. Pretty useful to know that that's there. And it's often patients will remark, oh yes, my son, when he was 2 or 3 years old, didn't like sleeping with some plushy, fluffy toy, but actually their hard Lego dinosaur or whatever it might be. I'm sure other play bricks are available. But anyway, you get my point. Having a hard something in your hand can make a difference and just give you that reassurance. Please, no smutty euphemistic jokes there. Anyway, let's move on. So, the siesta, don't underestimate how important this is. If you can honour it within your daily life, then do so. Clearly though, it's often overridden by caffeine and sugar and the boss breathing down your neck or other things that need to happen in this post-industrial world, because it's never used to happen even when we were more simply farming the land or living in more ancient times. But obviously there's this gap here too, and this is important. Now, even as recently as Victorian times, this was a well-established part of the day, and it was called the watch. Now, something about the watch is really interesting. It is a very natural time to be wakeful, especially as adult human beings, and that's something we'll come back to in a moment. The watch is a really natural wakefulness time, and it's often a time that your brain can have a lot of clarity if you allow it to. And obviously taking sleeping pills and everything else, we're just overriding our natural rhythms over a 24-hour period, not dividing them into a 12-12 or day-night, night-day situation. So here, this is often a time where people would plan, often a time when people would organise, often time people would make lists, obviously that's sort of part of the same process, often a time where they would have gentle meetings and, well documented, not that this should be a huge surprise, also have some sex. But anyway, the point that I'm driving at here is this isn't to be ignored if this is natural for your rhythms. I speak to a lot of people in a lot of different working environments, and often the architects or the problem solvers, the plumbers, the electricians, and the designers will often go, it came to me in the middle of the night. I've got a lot of creative patients who do some of the most creative stuff on purpose getting up in the night. But this is not to be a daytime in the nighttime. This is supposed to be a time where, yes, you're engaging, but not bringing on lots of bright light and not trying to do daytime stuff. But if you can get some useful stuff done here, like reorganizing your world, then that can obviously be paid off, and that you don't need to do it in the daytime. Making lists, really, really useful. Often we have these remembrances in the nighttime that we would have forgotten. But the most important thing here is don't lie tossing and turning in bed, because you will only get yourself stressed out. Get up, possibly have a glass of water, because a very common reason that people wake up is a little spike in cortisol as your blood pressure drops a little bit and you've got a bit dehydrated. We're not going to talk about sleep in itself as far as, yes, you should be cooler and all of these other things and a dark room. I'm not really interested in that today, but obviously having a glass of water here could be useful, and just moving around, getting your blood pressure back up again. Now, just like here, we can also, to help us get back to sleep, is using some voice. And this is really ancient for us as human beings, and we mustn't underestimate this. Listening to a voice at this time of the night, listening to familiar noises is important. Now, I've already alluded to the small child falling asleep in the melee of an adult party and being very, very secure, and that is not unusual, but this comes into it as well. The things that hunt human beings, and clearly we're a little bit removed from that now, were most active between sunset and about midnight, 1 o'clock. Now, who do I want as an adult, because I'm sleeping at this point, let's just say this is sunset here, who do I want to look after me? I want the teenagers sitting around a fire just over there so I can hear their muffled voices for a number of reasons. First of all, teenagers, extremely quick and fast reflexes, stronger than most fully grown adults, or at least developing that strength, particularly the young men. Also, they want to be impressing their future partners, possibly. But more importantly, their night vision adjusts so much quicker. Their hearing is so much more acute. And why wouldn't you want them sitting just over there, just around the fire, keeping the fire going? We forget that we're not far removed in that sort of time scale to understand how important that is. So the teenagers, when do teenagers want to be awake most commonly? I'm not even going to answer that question. We all know that that's where they are in their preferred and happy place. And absolutely, I, as an adult who is not as strong as my 18-year-old teenage son anymore, I want them sitting around the fire so they can quickly hear what's going on, frighten it away, or get their night vision so much quicker adjusted from looking at the fire much quicker than an adult, especially as we're getting on in years. So it has this very natural rhythm where we as teenagers would have been wanting to be up at night more. That was served a huge survival advantage to us. Then the adults would get up and plan because we're the ones with the experience and the knowledge over time. And then the time that was most safe for human beings is when the dawn is around. And that is when the babies and the elderly people would typically wake up. And many people will report this, that their elderly parents or so, or if you're older yourself, you'll notice that you're getting up earlier. And that's because we're just programmed to do that. It's deep within our history that that's a good time to be awake. Not a huge amount to do, just keeping the fires going and keeping reasonably quiet, allowing everyone else, particularly the teenagers who'd be keeping us safe at the most dangerous time, allowing them to sleep. Now, of course, there's these natural roles, and if ancestors were not worried if they were awake at night, and they weren't worried if they were sleeping during the day. But I hope some of this understanding helps to demystify why we've got ourselves in such a state about sleep. And the fact that we are trying to medicate our way through it with sleeping pills, and we're trying to medicate our way through the day with caffeine and sugar. This is just not the way we were supposed to be. And anybody who is a sailor or anybody who's been on more of a 24-hour cycle rather than this just rigid day-night cycle will almost likely attest to that. So, listening to a voice, again, holding something, very often it's our phones, but having the opportunity and the ability to make lists is incredibly important as we are in the night. And obviously lots of people now use their phones. Now that can be advantageous because it doesn't necessarily need a light being put on if you just want to sit there and make a list, not going to disturb anybody that you might be sharing the bed with. So I get pretty passionate about this. I'd love to know your comments. Do put them down below if you are, possibly experienced this sort of thing on holiday. But a lot of people are in this misconception that if you have a siesta, it mucks up your nighttime sleep. It does if your construct is the modern Western materialistic world. Absolutely it will, where you have to be, the alarm goes off at 6 o'clock and you have to be on the bus or on the train or commuting by whatever time it has to be. Of course, this is a problem, but we weren't ever designed to not have a wakefulness period here. And if you're comfortable with that, it often helps everything calm down. If you are awake here, but know that you're going to be able to get a siesta, instantly the stress of being awake is dispelled, and it just makes everything so much easier. And as a clinician myself, yes, I'm self-employed in that respect, but have I structured my day around the ability to have a siesta? Absolutely. Do I have a wakefulness time at night? Yes, I do. Do I use it constructively? Most of the time. So if you can build it into your life and you do have some agency over that, do give it a try, because this has helped so many of my patients just demystify the stress and the worry about having these wakefulness times here. It then helps to reduce the amount of stimulants needed in the afternoon, which also then reduces the requirement for alcohol in the evening to calm everything down. And that can really help your rhythms just get back into a much, much better way, much more in tune with actually how your brain wants to work. So I hope that's been useful. Love to know your comments, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.